Hi, welcome to RCKicks. In this episode, we're going to be covering every single thing that you need to purchase if you're going to attempt your first RC build. So you maybe have a few ready to runs and you've been looking at these kits and you're a little bit put off as there seems to be loads of information of all the random bits and bobs you need. Well, in this episode, I will cover every single thing that I would recommend getting for your first kit so that you know not to make any mistakes, and then you can buy all the bits you need so that when you kick off building your first kit, you have everything to hand and you haven't bought the wrong thing or you haven't missed out something that you needed, which means you've got to stop, buy something, wait another week or so for it to arrive so you can carry on. So if that has value to you, stay tuned. Hit it, Charlie. So to try and make this easier for beginners, what I plan to do is to cut this into different chunks. So we'll talk about the kits first, then we'll talk about all the electronics, then we'll talk about all the painting aspects of it, then we'll also cover all the tools that you'll need to do your first car. So the first thing we're going to kick off with is the actual kit. Now this is reasonably simple, but it's not just pick a kit and that's your lot. There's a few things inside the kit that you've got to check because you might have to purchase some different parts. Yeah, they didn't make it very simple that everything you need is in the box. So, depending on what kit you're going for, some will only have just the car. Some will have the car, a motor and an ESC included. Some will come with bearings, some won't come with bearings. So when you decided on the car that you like, now I would personally just go for the kit that you like the car itself. Now, whether it might be a buggy, it might be a road car, whatever. Now, once you've narrowed it down to the car that you want to go for, then you've got to look inside the kit or ask or look at the specifications of what's actually in it. Does it come with a motor included? If it does, you don't need to buy one. Does it come with an electronic speed controller inside? Some do, some don't. If not, then obviously later on when we talk about the electronics, we'll talk about which ones you have to buy. But if they're included, for now, as you're starting out, that's great. You'll use the ones in the kit and later on you can change them, upgrade them or whatever. Also with the bearings, some kits come with bearings in them, some don't. This one doesn't, it comes with bushes. You always want to get a set of bearings. Luckily, lots of the bearing manufacturers will actually sell the bearing kits for the car that you're actually going to be building, which makes life so much easier as you don't have to get into the manual, work out all the bearings that you need and then buy them separately. You can just Google it or go on eBay or go to one of the big bearing manufacturers that do RC bearings, and then they'll have a kit and you can just select it, buy it, and then 10 random bearings or 15 bearings will turn up, and that's everything you need for your kit. Now, another thing you need to think of when we go into the paint section is what kind of body you get in the kit. Is it polycarbonate or is it a hard body? If it's polycarbonate, then we have to decide on different types of paint than we do if it's polycarbonate, but we'll cover that in more detail when we get to the painting section. Now, another little tip for you if you're doing your first kit is go for a kit that has a body that is pretty much one color. It will actually make your life so much easier. If you go for a more complicated body, this can be a real challenge when you go to paint your body, that you need to have 4 colors, lots more masking, and it's a lot more tricky. For your first kit, just stick with a car that has one color all the way over. It will make your life so much easier, and the results that you'll get will be better than if you've got a very complicated one and you'll just mess up all the lines and stuff as you're learning how to paint up these bodies if you've never done it before. So the first one we're going to cover is the tools. Now this puts off quite a lot of people as they think they have to go out and buy a whole bucket load of tools to build their kit, which is half the price of the kit. You don't really, but there's a few little things that will make your life easier when you're building it. Now, one of the things that always catches people out is if you're buying a Tamiya kit, the screws that are in the Tamiya kit are not Phillips screws, they're JIS. So they look like Phillips screws, but the actual head is different. So if you use a Phillips screwdriver on JIS screws, you'll tend to round them off. It will work, but you will round them off way more than if you get the correct tools. So if you're thinking about getting a Tamiya, I would recommend buying a kit like this. This will do everything you need to build it. This is JIS, so it will fit perfectly, and you get Allen keys in here as well, flat-ended screwdriver and the nuts to do the wheels, and you get everything in one little thing. Prices, I'll put a link up here, you can see what it is. So that is a really good investment, especially if you're thinking about doing a Tamiya, then you're going to do another Tamiya, you'll use these. Now, these are not pro quality. In other words, I found that over a year, the amount of kits that I build, they do wear down. You can just cut off the Allen keys and they just get smaller. But if you can only do a few kits and normal use, these I can highly recommend them. The quality is there. It's just if you're going to be doing as many kits as I've got, then really you're kind of moving up to slightly more expensive kit tools. But for your first kit, that is a really good place to start. Next, you need a pair of snips. You can get them from any local car shop, just don't get massive ones. You only need a small set. They come in handy for lots of things, from taking the parts off the parts trees. Then a body reamer. A body reamer is for putting the post holes in the bodies. Now Tamiya sometimes does them for you and sometimes doesn't. Same with other manufacturers, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. So a cheap body reamer is a really good way to go to get the nice holes. Basically you poke it through, you twist it, and it will burr out the hole for you. That is definitely a worthy investment if your body doesn't have the holes pre-done for you. Again, when you get the kit, you can check to see if it has got the holes already. You can put this off for a later date, but that's one that you definitely want to add down the line. If you've got slightly deeper pockets, you can pick a JIS up ratchet screwdriver. That will make your life a little bit easier than, say, the standard one that's in the kit, but it's not a necessity, but I really like it, so I use those as well. This one's from Tamiya, a little bit more expensive, but you can get, you can pick up JIS ratchet screwdrivers off eBay or anywhere like that. Now, another one that's worth getting, not necessarily for your first kit, but probably worth getting down the line if you're going to do more, it's these. Now, these are brilliant for holding when you're building up the shocks. You can hold the actual shock piston without damaging it. You can get away with a set of pliers and a bit of a cloth, but these are definitely worth getting. You tend to use them quite often, so maybe your second build, but that's something you want to look into. They're not expensive. Next one is a scalpel, very handy for cutting all your decals out. You want to get one that's got a range of blades as well, so that you can swap it out as it gets dull. Super cheap, pick them up from any craft shop. Next is a set of scissors. Now these are going to be used for cutting out the polycarbonate body. Also, you'll use them for opening up the bags in the kit and for cutting all your decals out and stuff like that. I tend to use rounded ones as you tend to get a better finish when you're going around the arches, also cutting out the decals. So a good set of scissors, definitely worth getting. Now, I've got one of these, which is really handy, and it's actually a little grinder. I use this for grinding around the polycarbonate bodies. Believe it or not, it's actually a dog grooming product. Dirt cheap with a rechargeable battery in it. And I just modified the top, and it's really good as a basic, like, Dremel, if you will. Super cheap and rechargeable. That is something that I've just sort of ended up with, and I use it quite a lot. But you can just use a piece of sandpaper, tons of different types of it. You can get it from any hardware shop. And what you do is you take your tin of spray paint, you put it around it, and then you can do your wheel arches and all kinds of things. So you don't have to get fancy. You can just use a bit of sandpaper. If your kit is going to be built and the screws and the nuts and bolts that are in it are Allen bolts, then you're going to need something like this. A little bit more of an investment, brilliant. I use these every day. I really like these. If anything, I need to spend some more money on my tools, as my tools are quite basic. But a lot of my cars, the more higher end ones, tend to use Allen, not JIS or Phillips screws. So that all depends. You only need that if your kit that you've purchased uses them, but you can check on the box and it will tell you whether it's Allen or JIS or just Phillips screws. So the next one is electronics, and this is the one that most people probably find the hardest when they're setting out. What exactly do I buy? What do I need to buy? What's compatible? And how do I connect it all up? Obviously, when you buy it ready to run, it's all kind of done for you and you just take it out and drive it. But when you're buying a kit, the options are massive, so it's easy to get lost. So we're going to kick off from one end and work our way through every bit of electronics that you're going to need to think about buying for your car. So the first thing is, how do you control it? And that's the transmitter. Now, when you buy ready to run, it already comes done for you, but you'll need to decide what transmitter you want. Now, they range massively and there's millions of them, but if you're starting out, don't spend an absolute fortune. Now, I've got quite a few, and the one that I tend to go to for my sort of entry level stuff is this from Radiolink. Now, the reason is it doesn't look that great, but it has lots of features and functionality, and also you can store multiple cars in this. So that makes life much easier than when you have your ready to runs, for instance. Every single car has a different transmitter and it can be a real pain. Well, you can do away with all that and have one transmitter and have 10 cars in the memory of it, and then just jump from one to the other, and that is fantastic. Also not expensive, but there is millions and millions of different options to suit your price point. Also depends what you're doing. I've done a whole video on a whole range of these, so I'll put a link in the description. Go check that later on if you want. Now, the main one you need to know is that when you buy it, it comes with a receiver. Now, a lot of them come as a combination, so you buy the transmitter and you get the receiver with it. That makes the life a lot easier because you know they're going to work together. But you can buy additional receivers for your transmitter. So when you're looking at one, have a look and see how much the receivers are individually, because some are quite cheap and some of them are quite expensive. So that will also impact on what kind of transmitter you want to buy, because if you're going to buy a transmitter and you're thinking of having 5 or 6 cars, then 5 or 6 receivers, if the receivers are 3 times the price of another transmitter, it's going to get a bit expensive, if that makes any sense. So that's how you get a signal from your hand to the car itself. Now, the signal that you get in here has to go around the car. So the first thing we need is power. How are we going to get power in the car? This is where, again, it can get really tricky. Now, I'll try and keep it quite simple, but there's 2 basic types you can go with. You can go with a LiPo battery, or you can go NIMH. NIMH is much older technology, heavier, but much simpler, easier to charge, easier to manage, a lot safer and simpler to use. So if you're starting out, this might be a way to go. But if you've been using LiPos and you're ready to run for ages, then you're already up to speed, then obviously you can get LiPos. Now, if you're going down the LiPo route and you already used them, well, you'll know that you need to have something like a battery reader so you can tell what voltage it is, because when you store these, you need to store them at their storage charge. You can't charge them to the top and just leave them at 100%. Also, you don't want to leave them at 0. So that's a whole nother video on how to actually look after your LiPos. But I assume that if you've got ready to runs, you're already using LiPos. If not, probably want to stay away from LiPos at the beginning and just pick up a few cheap NIMHs, and that will get you going. Another thing to confuse you a little bit more when you're starting out is the connections. As you can see from these 2 batteries, the connections are different. Now, there's quite a few standards. Yes, believe it or not, there is loads of them. Now, if you've been using ready to runs like Armour or Traxxas, you're probably used to their kind of connections. A few that are quite popular, especially in the building, is Dean's, if it's going to be down like a 2 to 3S. Once you get over 3S, Dean's can't really cope with that kind of draw. I tend to use Dean's for most of my 1/10 stuff, but then obviously as I go up I use Traxxas as well. But you end up down the line having a bit of everything, which can be a bit of a pain. So that covers the basic batteries. There is a whole lot more to it, but I hope you can kind of decide which way you want to go and then do a bit more research on LiPos, you know, if you're going to go down that road. Other side of it is obviously we've got to charge these batteries and you need a charger. Now there is millions of chargers out there to suit all price points. Now I use this one, well I've got a few to be honest with you, and they're pretty standard and they do the job. You can pick them up. I'll put a few up here that are available, but in this market there is literally loads of them, and they all seem to be pretty decent these days. They're very easy to use with a nice color screen. So again, if you're only going to be charging up the odd battery, then you don't need to get an all singing, all dancing one, just a standard basic one. But you definitely want to be looking at one that does LiPos and NIMH, because down the line you might change to LiPos if you don't use them already, and then you'd have to buy another charger. So it's worth getting one that does both. So that gives us power, and we've got a signal. But where does that signal go? Well, the first thing it goes to is the brains, if you will, and that's the electronic speed controller. Now this is connected directly to the motor. Also, it connects directly to the battery. So that's where the power comes in. Then it connects with another cable to your receiver. So your receiver goes into channel 2. So the signal comes into the receiver, it goes down this wire into the ESC, and say you want to accelerate, it then sends a signal to the motor, and then the motor will spin, and that's where you get your drive from. Also, the steering signal will come down from the receiver, go into the ESC, and then go off to the servo, which does the steering, and the steering goes into channel 1. On the receiver, you'll see there's all channels down here, and that's where you plug it in. So channel 1 is the steering, channel 2 is the ESC, and that's pretty much standard. The only other side to add another layer of complexity to it is whether you go brushed or brushless. Now this is a whole episode on its own, but if you've got your kit and it comes with a motor, you'll probably get an ESC that's brushed. So if you have a brushed motor, you need a brushed capable ESC, which is basically 2 wires. If you are going to go with a brushless system, you need to have an ESC that is brushless capable, and the brushless motor itself, as you can see, it's 3 cables. But the ESC basically does the same job, it's just how it communicates with the motor. It's a lot more complicated and there's a lot more back and forward with the brushless system, especially if it's censored. If it's censored, there's another wire so that the ESC knows whereabouts the actual rotation of the motor is. So depends. You're probably used to using brushless if you've got ready to runs, but when you buy your first kit, you might want to just run it on a brushed motor, especially if it's in the box already, as well as if the ESC is in the box. Run them first and then you can upgrade later. Most RTRs tend to be a bit more bashy, whereas if you're building an actual kit yourself and you're putting all that money and time into the body, you probably don't want to be flying it all over the place and jumping it and smashing it up like you would ready to run. Kits are a little bit different. Then you've got the servos. Now there is a few gotchas on the servos, and there's hundreds of them, again, to give you lots of choice, which then just confuses you even more. The best way to look at it is there's full size servo, and then you get low profile or half height, depends on what you want to call it. Now you want to check your kit to see what it actually requires, because some kits don't have enough space, so they want a low profile half height servo like this one here. Others will have plenty of room and you can use a standard servo. That does catch out quite a lot of people, so definitely worth checking before you spend your money on your servo. As for what servo you should buy, depends on your budget, depends on your need, depends what you're doing. I would recommend, if you're going to be driving it in the garden and you're driving a kit that has slightly bigger wheels, I would lean towards a servo that has metal gears and is a little bit more powerful. If you're running on the road and it's a road car, the kit that you built, you don't need to get a 30 kg servo when you're on the road driving small little tires. So set your budget. A few servos that I've used that I really like. For my racing buggies, I tend to use Reef, which is, you can easily spend £100+ on a Reef servo, but that's for racing. Also, if you're going to have a big racing clod, for instance, Reef are brilliant for those. but they are high-end 100-odd pound servos. Well, that's kind of stupid to put that into a Tamiya little kit. Then you can get Servos servos, which also are good for racing, and they do a whole range. Then you can get your Banggood specials, which you'll pick up for £25 or so, that will be metal geared and will be more than adequate for these. Ones that I tend to use are these KSTs. I really like these. I was actually sent a few of these and I've been using them for the last year, and I'm really chuffed with the price point on them. This is a CM653, but really like them. So I use those in a few of my race cars and road cars. They're kind of a sweet spot in the middle. And then you can go all the way down to your £9.99, £10 servos. But again, depends what your budget is and depends what your needs are. But that pretty much covers all the electronic side of it. Not that complicated when you plug it together. Again, not that difficult. The motor connects to the ESC. You'll get 2 wires that just plugs straight in. Now you see, here's another thing that might catch you out. This is blue and yellow and this is green and yellow. Okay, do the yellow to yellow and then the blue to the green. Then the ESC, that is, you would think that the ESC connects to the receiver channel 1, being that it's a brain, but it's not. It's always channel 2, and then channel 1 is for the steering, if you remember that. Also, when you plug them into the receiver, there is a plus and a minus side. You've got to make sure you get them around the right way. If you look on the actual cable, black is the negative, so make sure the negative is on the right side, so that if you plug it in the wrong way round, then obviously it's not going to work. So that's the usual first mistake. Also, on the ESCs, you sometimes get little tabs that you have to lift the jumper and move it, depending on if you're using NIMH or LiPo. Definitely check that. Don't just drive it straight away, because if you have it set on NIMH and you plug a LiPo into it, it will run fine, but the ESC will not cut out before the cells get too low in the LiPo, and then you can damage your battery. But if you've been driving ready to run, you'll probably know that already. So now we move on to painting, and this is a section that can really put off people that have never painted anything in the past. And the first thing you need to do, if I could just ask you to take 2 seconds, if you've watched the videos and you've watched a few and you enjoy it, to hit that subscribe button. 58.6% of you that watch the channel aren't even subscribed. It costs you absolutely nothing, and being that we're such a small RC channel, every new subscriber really helps the algorithm find our content and push it out to more RC fans like you. Is find out, do you need to get polycarbonate paints? Has your kit got a polycarbonate body, or is it a hard body? Because how you paint them is vastly different. Most kits tend to be polycarbonate these days, but there is a few hard body kits around. So just check when you buy your kit. Don't go out and buy all your paints before you check, as you've probably bought the wrong ones, because there is different types of paint. Polycarbonate paint needs to be flexible. If you take car paint from your local car shop and you paint up a flexible polycarbonate body, all you'll do is it will flake off the minute you hit something. So don't do it. It never works. Just don't do it. Go and get polycarbonate paint. Now there's a few places you can get it from. Tamiya is one of them, and probably the most prominent one that you can get, but they are a little bit expensive, but they work brilliantly. Now Tamiya do 2 types of paint, so you've got to be careful when you go to the shop. It's got PS is for polycarbonate and TS is for hard bodies. So make sure you don't buy the wrong ones, otherwise it's not going to work. Now, if you're going to go box art, look in the manual. It will tell you what PS paints to buy, and then you can just go and purchase them at your local hobby shop. Now, there is other options available. There's a fast track tin that you can get polycarbonate. This is white. As you can see, you get quite a bit more for your money. Now, if you're going to go off box art and just do your own thing, these are actually quite a good way to go, as you get a lot more for your money. I personally use the white and the black like this, and I'll explain why in a bit. So when you go and purchase your colour, if you're doing your car in one colour or 2 colours, whatever it is, if they're light, I would highly recommend buying PS1 white and PS5 black. Why? If you paint your body in one colour and then that's it, what happens is it's not totally solid. light will shine through it and you'll see shadows on it. Also through the windows, you will see the color on the inside, and it lightens the inside of the car and doesn't look that great. What I recommend doing is laying down your color, doing a good few coats until you've got a nice homogeneous color all over. Then do it in white as well and put down 2 or 3 layers of white. That will really make that color pop and make it very solid. Then after that, if you've got like a grey, you can do grey, but you can also do black as well. And then you put down the black, and you can probably just do 2 layers of black, and then you're sorted. The reason that works is the white protects the colour from going darker when you put the black on. So it will still pop on the outside, but the inside of the car is now dark. And the benefits to that is the windows, when you look through the windows, the car is dark inside and it just looks a lot better. And because you've got all those extra layers, the paint is nice and solid. Now, if you're buying a kit that's got a hard body, that's a whole different ball game, because you can go to your local car shop, just like I do, and save yourself quite a bit of money, and then pick up any color you like. Now, the Tamiya colors are limited. There's not a massive range. You know, there's only so many. And when it's a hard body, well, there is so many car colors out there, real car colors out there. You can pick and choose whatever you want, and it's a lot cheaper. So you can pick the color you want. You'll then need a lacquer clear to go over the top once you put it down, but you also need to get a surface primer. So this is much more like how real cars are painted. You have a primer first, then you have the color, then you have the clear over the top, and then after that you cut it and polish it, and then you get your color. Well, I personally prefer painting hard body cars as they're more fun, and it's on the outside, it's a lot easier. There's not quite as much messing around as you get with polycarbonate bodies, but polycarbonate bodies do look brilliant when you've painted them up as well. Some extra little tips. What you need to do is, if you've got any lines in your painting, get some of the edging tape, the Tamiya edging line tape. This is what gives you those super sharp lines, and it also, if you get the thin one, you can curve around corners. That really helps give you a sharp edge to your paint. Then get a whole range of masking tape, because you can use different thicknesses, right up to the big sheets if you want to cover a certain area. If you're only painting one section, but the rest of the car needs to be masked off. But that's sort of, you can pick them up all over the place. You can pick them up at car shops, but you can also pick up the sort of smaller things at your local RC shops as well. And then the line tape you can get from RC shops. Another little tip for you as well that you might want to pick up is a PS55 flat clear. Why? Because if you've got lines going across your body, if you spray on the inside PS55 flat clear, it will creep into all of the little gaps. And because it's clear on the inside, it's like invisible paint. It doesn't show up. So you put down a couple of layers of that first, it creeps into all the little crevices. Then when you put the color down, the color can't go into those little gaps and bleed out, and it helps give you that crisp line that looks really professional. Another little top tip for you is picking up one of these, polycarbonate body cleaner. This is really expensive, but works brilliantly at fixing those little bleeds and little mistakes with a little cotton bud. I've saved so many body painting jobs with this stuff. I hate paying the money that it costs. It's like £10 a go, £9, but it is the best I've found for cleaning up those little mistakes. Also, if you get a blemish in one color, you can cut it back with the polycarbonate cleaner and then blow it in again if it's a flat color, not metallic, and then it will save your body. So if you've got some overspray, for instance, you spray, say this body is sprayed in 2 colors, white and blue, you put the white down afterwards and you see there's some overspray, your body's not ruined. You can cut back all that white and the blue with the polycarbonate cleaner, then blow it in white again, and it's saved your body. So this is a godsend. Another little tip, if your car comes with a driver, this is painted professionally, and that's a whole different world of airbrushing. But if you're starting out, that's something that's way down the line. But what you can do is get these little tiny Tamiya paints from your local sort of shop. I picked these up from like a hobby shop, but you can get them in sort of arty shops sometimes, and a decent set of brushes, and then you can paint up your driver. Now, you'll never get it as good as an airbrushing job, but considering how small they are, and if you take your time with it, you can paint up your driver. And that's how I tend to do mine, as my airbrushing skills are rubbish. So I think that pretty much covers all aspects of painting, and it just takes a lot of practice. So if you want to give it a go for the first time, you might want to pick up a few cheap bodies, just general, doesn't matter what they are, just so you can practice on them a few times before you start doing your really nice bodies. And if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Polycarbonate cleaner can always come back and save you. Anyway, I think that pretty much covers everything. I hope you enjoyed that. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.